If you're planning to study at university, you need to know how to cite sources within a text you write, as well as how to write a proper reference list. If you're a student of mine, and if you're in English 5, you don't need to bother with this just yet, but it's still good for you to have an idea of what's coming. If you're one of my English 6 students, I expect you to try your best, but I'll still let mistakes slide. It's a learning process after all. But if you're in English 7, you'd better be aiming to get this right, because once you get to university, there will be little mercy. Now, different learning faculties, as well as different teachers, have slightly different templates for citing sources. Two very common ones are called MLA and MPA, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I'm going to go through some of the basics, and hopefully after this lesson you will have a better understanding of what citing sources is all about. The basic rule is if you write something where you use information from outside sources, you need to let the reader know what information comes from where. And this doesn't just mean copying and pasting a few internet links and putting them at the end of your paper. You need to give the name of whoever wrote the text you're referring to, as well as when the text was published, and you need to do it within your own writing. Show exactly what parts of your writing comes from which source. So to explain what I mean, let's use an example. Let's say you're writing about environment issues, and in the online newspaper The Guardian, you come across an article about plastic in the ocean. The article is titled Plastic Now Pollutes Every Corner of the Earth, and it was written by Robin McKee and was published in 2016. And one part of this article goes like this. In some cases, wildlife adapts to the spread of plastic. For example, on islands such as Diego Garcia, hermit crabs have taken to using plastic bottles as homes. However, most of the impact on wildlife is harmful. Creatures ranging from seabirds to turtles become entangled in plastic and drown or choke to death. Notice that I'm using quotation marks here to show that this is an exact quote, direct quote from this article. So let's say you want to use this in your own text. Two things you need to do. First, you need to paraphrase, rewrite this in your own words. And second, make sure to mention where this information comes from. And that should be the name of the author, McKee in this case. That's the one you'll be referring to in your text. So it could look something like this. McKee writes that while some animals actually take advantage of our plastic waste, such as hermit crabs using old plastic bottles as shells, the effects that our plastic pollution has on wildlife are mostly devastating, since many sea-dwelling animals die as a result of becoming entangled in pieces of plastic floating in the ocean. Now, of course, this is just one example of how this could be paraphrased, and the important part of this lesson is the reference. McKee writes. That's how we begin this, and then the paraphrasing comes. And of course, this name alone will tell the reader of your paper nothing about who this McKee is or where this information was originally published, and that's why you need to write a full reference list at the end of your paper. So if the one who reads your paper wants to know more about this source, they will go to the end of your paper to your reference list. And in your reference list, it could look something like this. Name comes first, McKee. All of your sources should be in alphabetic order, so it's easy to find a specific one from a named reference in your paper. Now, like I said, there are different templates for this. You can find plenty of useful guides online. I'll put some links in the description. Some will say that you should write out the full name. Others will say you should only write out the last name and then the first letter of the first name, as it is here. You should have year of publication, and you should have the title. In this case, we need both the title of the article and of the newspaper where it was published. You need to specify that it's an online source, and you need to provide the link as well as when you accessed it the last time, since things published online may be altered later, so you need to tell when you accessed it the last time. Book titles should always be in italics, and some templates will say that article titles should be within quotation marks, and newspaper or magazine titles should be in italics, and others say this title should be in italics. And yeah, by now you can probably tell it's a jungle. And again, plenty of useful guides online that can show you how to write a full reference list. depending on what kind of source you have. If it's a book, an online article from a database, video clip, something with more than one author, something without a known author, and so on. Like I said, different teachers will have different demands. Some will tell you just be consistent, pick MLA or APA and stick with it. Others will tell you you have to use MLA, and if a single comma is out of place in the reference list, you need to fix it before you can pass the assignment. If you're one of my students in English 6 or 7, I say try to be consistent, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're here to learn after all. This is the place to make mistakes and learn from them, so you know what to do once we're at university. Okay, back to in-text citation, which this lesson is about. And like I said, this here is one example of how to use this particular piece of text in your work. Some templates demand that you put the year of publication here too. It will look like this. Just put the year of publication after the name within brackets, and then the rest is just the same. Here's a pro tip. Whenever you do your research for a writing project and you take notes, as you do before you start the writing process, always write down page numbers when you take notes from a book or something else that has page numbers, because some templates will tell you to also write page numbers in your reference in text. Sometimes it might be good to say more about the source within the text. We could write like this. Mackie 2016 writes in The Guardian that so on and so forth. This is all the same. I just added in The Guardian here. And this could spare the reader the trouble of looking to your reference list if they're wondering who this name Mackie is. Now they know this is an article published by The Guardian. It's a well-known newspaper. Sometimes the title of a book or article could be relevant to what you're saying in the paper. So there are different ways that you can do it. Reference can also come at the end, which would look like this. The paraphrasing here is still the same, just started a sentence instead, while some animals and so on, and then added the reference like this at the end of the paragraph. Name, Mackie, and year within brackets at the end. And again, if the reader wants to know more about this source, they can go to your reference list and find all the information there. Now this example here only shows one short piece of text paraphrased into a very short paragraph, actually just one very long sentence. Some would call it an unnecessary long sentence. How about when you write a full paper? What about using multiple sources? How often do you need to put in the reference? Do you need to repeat references? Rest easy, we're getting to that bit now. Let's say you're writing a paper where you're using 3 different sources. These are just made-up examples now, just to show you the principle. In a paper, it might look something like this. Miller states blah, 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 and this is whatever Miller says. When the reference comes in the beginning of a paragraph like this, then it is assumed that everything in this paragraph is from this source, Miller in this case. All of this is what Miller says. Even when we start a new sentence, we're still referring to this particular source. When you start a new paragraph, it can be assumed that you have left this reference and now you're doing something new. So next paragraph can begin with a new references. In her book, title, whatever the title of the book is, Johnson argues that, and so on, and this is all what Johnson says. And then for aesthetical reasons, you may want to put a new references without starting a new paragraph. Usually when you start a new paragraph, it means that you're starting a new topic. You're starting to talk about something new. But perhaps you're still on this topic, but you want to compare whatever Johnson argues to what someone else says. And then you can do that. You just mention a new reference. However, according to Davis, blah, 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 blah. So now all that comes after here is from Davis. So you start reference, and then all that comes after that is from that reference until you either start a new paragraph or mention a different reference. That's the golden rule. And then perhaps next paragraph looks something like this, blah, 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 and then with the reference at the end. So here we can assume that this here is what Davis is saying until the paragraph ends, and then new paragraph, and then when the reference comes in the end, then we assume that everything in the paragraph before that is Miller. So all of this is Miller. Some teachers or faculties may not want you to mix putting reference in the beginning and at the end of paragraphs like this. Many will not have a problem with it. And to me personally, it's really all about aesthetics. It's depending on what you write, it may just look or sound better to have reference as part of the sentence or not. You may want to emphasize that Johnson argues so and so, and not just put information there and then say who said it. It's all about what sounds good. And finally, I'd like to point out what words are used in this example along with the reference. We've got Miller states, blah, blah, blah. Johnson argues, according to Davis, and so on. You should make sure to use suitable words depending on what kind of text you're referring to and what kind of text you're writing. If the source that you are referring to is an informative one that only tells pure facts, you can use, for example, these words, this person says, they write, they state, and so on. While as if you're referring to an argumentative text, you may want to say, this person argues, according to so-and-so, this one suggests, they claim. And using suitable words for your references also shows that you understand the nature of your source, and you can tell if the writer you're referring to is presenting facts or expressing an opinion. Okay, I hope you got something out of this lesson and that you now feel a little better equipped to start practicing source references.